Wonderful. Thank you, Lisa. It is such a pleasure to be here. Thank you all for attending and spending your time to extend your knowledge about phonemic awareness just a little bit more. Before we get started, I'd like us to take a moment and get grounded here and just reflect for a little bit about where you are in your PA journey. So are you seeing your PA instruction make a big difference in terms of children's reading and spelling? If you have seen a big impact on their reading and spelling, then your instruction is already pretty powerful. If you haven't, you might just need to do a little bit of tweaking to see that spillover effect into reading and spelling. If you have seen a big impact, then I hope that you're still going to take away a couple of interesting nuggets or descriptions that will be helpful to your colleagues. And if you're still waiting for that impact, then I hope you will find things in this presentation to make your PA teaching have a more powerful effect on reading and spelling. Perhaps you'll even try out some of these routines and use them to advance your own practice. All right, before we get started, I just wanted to give you a moment to prepare, and I'd love it if you would get your chips ready. So you can just make some chips out of a piece of paper if you have two different colors of paper, or if you have lined paper and plain paper. And you can see that mine here, they're just like little chips like this. And we're going to be doing some routines, demonstrating some routines where Dr. Martin is going to be the teacher and I'm going to be the student, and you'll be able to follow along. And as we know, by engaging in that multimodal memory system, right? It'll help you retain some of the routines in this talk and hopefully make what we talk about more useful with your students. When we're thinking about teaching children to read, there's two really broad areas, right? One is oral language development, super important, and the other area is cracking the code. I wanted to set up the talk today in this context. I think there's been some miscommunication about maybe how some of us see phonemic awareness and its role in literacy instruction. So I wanted to provide that context. So I see phonemic awareness as falling within the area of your instruction where you're helping children learn how to crack the code. And we've got all these different elements. They need to be able to recognize their letters. They also need to be able to form their letters. Phonemic awareness, teaching letter sound patterns, giving them practice applying those patterns so they can decode single words, words in sentences, and decodable readers, learning how to use those patterns to encode words so they can begin spelling words the way they sound. We know that that is such an important step in young children's literacy journey. And then finally, reading aloud. So if you hear the term in the talk today, oral only instruction, what we're talking about is doing a PA activity orally rather than using manipulatives. Okay? We're not saying that you should only be teaching phonemic awareness, right? Phonemic awareness is always taught as part of the literacy block. Towards the end of the talk today, we'll be addressing how you can make those connections between phonemic awareness and reading and phonemic awareness and spelling. So you can look forward to that at the end. Okay, how are you doing with your chips? Does everybody have some chips ready? If not, you've got one more slide where you can kind of chill a little bit and make those chips. You can walk out of the room, do whatever you need to do to get those ready. So these are just the goals of the talk. I hope that by participating today, you'll deepen your understanding of why phonemic awareness is important for learning to read, and that you'll learn a simple way to visualize the phonemic awareness sequence. What that does is, as an instructor, that helps make you independent. So you can draw from your phonemic awareness resources, but not be chained to them, right? And then you can also adapt them for the needs of particular students or groups of students. I'm also hoping you'll learn how to introduce and practice segmentation with 4 sounds and how to connect phonemic awareness to phonics instruction. All right, is everybody ready? Let's see some hands if you're ready with your chips. Get them up there. Okay, yay, excellent. Good, thank you so much. Thank you so much. All right. Let's take a moment and just find out kind of where we are in terms of these understandings about phonemic awareness. So I've got 4 true-false questions here and 1 fill in the blank. Don't worry, it's not going to be graded. Nobody's going to be asking you. All right, but go through and just mark off these statements, whether you think they are true or false, and then take your best guess at filling in the blanks in number 4. So we're doing this instructionally. You probably recognize the why. It's to activate your knowledge base, right? Before we get into extending that a little bit today. So I'm going to be quiet for a moment and let people complete this. Go ahead and put your hand up if you're finished. And maybe Colleen or Lisa can check out the crowd and tell me if most people are done and if it's time to move on. What do you guys think, facilitators?
Seems like people are ready.
Seems like people are ready. Okay, great. Thank you. In this first section, I'm going to be talking about why teach phonemic awareness to struggling decoders. So yes, we're definitely going to get to the what, but it's also so important that we remember the why. The main reason why, of course, falls into the category of the main reason for reading, which is reading comprehension, right? Everything we do in literacy instruction feeds into reading comprehension. And the problem is that humans, the reason why learning to read is so difficult, it's because humans don't comprehend print. We perceive print, but our brains are not wired to process print. Their brains are wired to process language. So what we're doing is we're taking the print off the page and we're recoding that print into language. And it's the language that we comprehend. It's the language that we get the meaning from. So converting print to meaning efficiently is so important. And that can't happen without strong phonological processing. I think we all would recognize that struggling readers, there's many sources that contribute to being a struggling reader. But all good readers have strong phonological processing, and all good readers are strong decoders. So it's really important to keep that in mind, the connection between phonological processing, being able to read new words accurately and independently, being able to read fluently, and being able to comprehend, because that's where we want to go eventually. The PA is a foundational skill. All right. So unfortunately, phonological processing is a weakness that many struggling readers share. The good news is that phonemic awareness is pretty easy to develop. as teaching goes. I'm sure many of you have experienced this. Like, there are many things in reading that are more difficult to teach than PA. Once you get the routines down and once you feel comfortable, and that just takes time and time on task, right? When we're teaching phonemic awareness, what we're trying to do is we're trying to help build the phonological processing in the brain. So when that phonological processing is not strong, it makes it difficult to learn letter sound mappings, decode and remember new words, and for students to spell what they say. So phonemic awareness is an indicator of the strength and accuracy of phonological processing. The deeper the phonemic processing challenges are, you'll find the tougher it is for kids to learn phonics. And by addressing that underlying phonemic awareness issue and strengthening phonological processing, it helps children be able to make more progress in their phonics and in their decoding. So what does the child who could use some phonemic awareness work? What do they look like when you encounter them? Well, it might not be quite what you expect. Okay, you see a reading problem on the surface, right? You might see poor reading comprehension. You might get that from standardized testing, right? Or you might hear slow and halting reading. You might notice inaccurate word reading, poor spelling, or that they're frequently making self-corrections. So these are the problems that are on the surface. And I like to use this upside down pyramid when I think about phonemic awareness instruction as being core to building foundational skills. So when students are automatic with recognizing and forming their letters, and they're automatically able to segment and delete sounds from words, then they are able to more automatically spell and decode words. And when they can spell and decode words accurately, then you're going to have accurate reading that supports comprehension, and you're going to have faster reading that supports fluency. Okay, so it's real important that we look below those reading problems on the surface. And whenever you see that, go and check PA. Do a quick screener. We're going to talk about that later today and see, does that student need some PA work in order to help boost and strengthen their foundation? As I mentioned, the deeper the phonological processing challenges are for a student, the tougher it is to learn phonics. So teaching PA makes phonological processing stronger, and it supports spelling, decoding, reading fluency, and comprehension. And this little illustration here just illustrates that when you're doing all of these foundational skills, then students are really ready to receive the phonics instruction. And sometimes it's just very difficult to teach struggling readers phonics. And when that's the case, you might need to, in addition to keeping going with the phonics, add in some really focused time for PA. Not a lot of time, just, a few under 5 minutes, but daily practice. And that will make them more receptive to that phonics instruction. Now let's talk about where you want to get started teaching PA. Where should your teaching begin? And we're going to ground this talk in a case study, which Dr. Martin is going to present.
All right, so as we go through the talk this morning, we will be using this case study to help illustrate how to plan phonemic awareness instruction. So meet Bo. Bo is a second grader who loves to be outside playing sports, and learning to read has been challenging for him. He is able to read some familiar words, but he struggles to easily decode new words. He's only connected some graphemes to phonemes, resulting in an incomplete storage of the written word in his memory. When he's reading, he will often guess at words based on that first sound. So for example, he'll read stop for step, of for off, lake for like. Similar challenges are present in his spelling, resulting in words that often have missing or incorrect vowel sounds or missing sounds in words. And he participates in a reading intervention in his school through the multi-tiered systems of support framework. Next slide.
So let's talk about Bo and that foundation. So what might you do to find out? He's at the 15th percentile in oral reading fluency. One of the things you could do to dive a little deeper is to administer a phonemic awareness screener. And there's many that you could use. Personally, I find the Rosner to be a very handy screener. It is an older screener. It was published in the 70s. It's been used widely. It's great for any age of child or adult who is having reading struggles. I got my start in adult literacy, and I used to use the Rosner to figure out where to start with phonemic awareness with those students as well. So the Rosner, named after Jerome Rosner, is just an orally administered screener. You can see here there's 13 items. It's super quick. It's also freely available. You can just Google Rosner, TAAS, Test of Auditory Analysis Skills, and it'll come up along with these directions for instruction. I tend to not pay attention to these scores because I'm not interested in the grade level scores. I'm interested in using it to identify where to begin instruction. So let's take a little closer look at the Rosner and what that's all about. So it starts off with larger units of phonological awareness and moves to increasingly smaller units. So at the word level, we have things like say sunshine, now say it again, but don't say shine. And the student would say sun. I say picnic, now say it again, but don't say pick. They would say nick. Say cucumber, now say it again, but don't say Q. And the stopping rule, I think, is 2 or 3 items. It's on the direction sheet. I always give all 13. You know, if they miss 3 in a row, I stop, especially towards the end. But if they miss a couple up here, I keep going. I want to know what their performance is at the phoneme level, which is going to start right here with coat. Now say it again, but don't say k. And they say oat. So that shows their ability to delete that initial sound, right? Say meat, say it again, but don't say mm. So we have 3 trials with the initial sounds where they're deleting that and giving you what's left. Then there are 3 trials where they delete the final sound. They give you the beginning part of the word. And then at the end here, you can see there's some blend work. So say clap, now say it again, but don't say k. And they would say lap, say play, say it again, but don't say p. And they would say lay. So this is the screener that I find very handy. And once I've done that, then I understand where students are. Another way to look at the Rosner is at this big division. It's got 3 sound words and it's got 4 sound words. And this is a big jump in students' learning. You may have noticed this, especially if you're a first or second grade teacher. A lot of times kids get real confident with 3 sounds, decoding and spelling, phonemic awareness, but when you get to 4 sounds, ooh, it gets a lot tougher. And that's why the little talk today is focusing on 4 sounds.
All right, so let's look at how Bo did on the Rosner. So he was able to delete syllables from 2 syllable words. He was also able to delete the initial sound in a 3 sound word in 3 out of 3 items. And then he also deleted the final sound in those 3 sound words. Where he really had a lot of trouble was at that 4 sound level. Once those blends came in, he was 0 out of 4 accurate. Next slide.
So we're going to start assuming that your students don't know about chips, just in case. So I like to just talk about the manipulatives a little bit. So the purpose of the chips is to draw attention to the sounds and support working memory when students are learning a new PA task. Okay? So it's a lot to hold all those sounds in your head and to try to move them around, right? And so we want to give them that working memory support at first as they're learning the task. So working with chips first before doing oral practice will give them improved accuracy, and it's just a really important piece of them learning and understanding the task, being able to perform it accurately before you go to oral only practice. So the way that I would introduce chips for a very young child, say in preschool or kindergarten, might be just putting the 2 chips out there and saying, I've got some chips here, and they're 2 different colors. The yellow ones stand for our vowel sounds. And what do we know about vowel sounds? Well, they're just as long as your breath is. So I can say ah, or ah, or e, right? Those are the vowel sounds. Then we've also have consonant sounds. Consonant sounds are when your lips, tongue, or teeth are blocking the air. So you have sounds like t or f or. Those are our consonant sounds, and green chips are going to stand for those. So what we can do is for every word that we say, let me say the word is cat, for every word that we say, we can hear individual sounds in the word. And we can segment those sounds, putting down a chip for each sound. So in cat, the first sound is k. So I'd put down a green chip. And then when I stretch it out, ooh, I can feel my mouth open and I can feel the air come out of my mouth. That's going to be a vowel chip. I'm going to put the yellow one down. And then cat, I'm going to listen for that last sound as I say it, and I'm going to put the third chip down. So you can see this is the pattern that we would use for a word like cat, that is a consonant vowel followed by a consonant. So that's how we're going to use our chips. All right, so that's the type of intro that I would do. And I just want to make a little aside because teachers are very busy and manipulatives are tough to keep track of. And the only thing I'd like to say is just using interesting objects like coins or matchbooks or cars or jacks draws attention to the objects rather than to the sounds. Okay, so you can do that, but children have limited attention and their attention is going to go to what is interesting. You want to make the sounds the most interesting part, the sounds and the colors. Okay. It's also helpful to make them easy to clean by laminating them and then cutting them. And so that saves some time down the road. All right. Here's a few quick tips for teaching phonemic awareness, which you may already know, and these may be obvious to you, but I figure there are some people on here who are just at the beginning of this practice. So I just wanted to make this clear. For assessment and instruction, the teacher should always face the students. Okay, so if you typically work side by side with students, when you're doing PA, you should change your setup so that you are facing them because they need to not only hear and say the words, but they also need to see your mouth as a cue. The teacher speaks the words normally and the students echo. So this is so important. It's very tempting to try to stretch out that word and enunciate it a little bit more And what you're doing is you're doing the segmentation for the student. If you do that, you want to give them the opportunity to do it. And they should be doing that segmentation based on their awareness of the word as they say it. Some of the students will be able to pick it up by listening, but not the ones who really have a phonological challenge. They're going to need to say it and feel it in their mouth. So the students should always echo the word before they start to segment it. If you run into an error, the first thing you do is you repeat the word and you have them echo it. So I say can, they say k, and. So they're always saying the word first before they segment it. Use manipulatives for teaching any new PA skill to any age student. Okay. Students cannot learn new PA tasks without manipulatives. It is not struggling readers anyway. It is they're too complicated and working memory is too challenged. So we really want to use those manipulatives to introduce any new PA skill. If you have older students in middle school, make your chips a little bit smaller, like a 1/2 inch square. If you have younger students in kindergarten, you can make them this size or larger. Okay. But you always want to use those chips, and then you're going to move away from that as they gain automaticity. When the student's moving the manipulatives, it's really important that they only use one hand. With many struggling readers, you have this mixed dominance thing where they're like all the hands are in there and everything's going. You want it to be one hand, and there's different schools of thought about which hand it should be, and nobody really knows, right? So but just, everybody has thoughts about it, including me. So, but just make sure they're using one hand all the time and that it's the same hand. There are different scaffolds to be used in phonemic awareness, and they're used for different purposes. So I'm sure all of you or many of you recognize these Alconin boxes, right? And using these boxes provides a scaffold that identifies the number of sounds for the student. This is a great start, especially for very young students and for children who have extreme needs. But as soon as you can, you want to take those Alconin boxes away and have the student do the work. They have 4 or 6 chips in front of them, and you say a word, and they have to figure out that it's 3 and which 3 it is. So that's the next step in your instruction, is to just go with the manipulatives where they don't have the boxes. And then the goal, of course, is the oral only instruction. Okay, the oral only practice. The oral only practice. So you would use this or this plus the Alconin squares for introducing a new PA skill. And then when they show mastery, you would shift to just oral practice. Now we're going to transition a little bit and talk about what to teach. So this is the section that just helps you visualize a sequence for PA instruction so that you can be more independent in terms of your instruction and your use of materials. So you may have noticed this little pattern at the top of the slide. Okay, this is actually the sequence or a sequence for teaching phonemic awareness. So first, you start at the syllable level, okay, with very young students like preschool students, right? With other students, you can start at the syllable level if you want to, but we know that this part doesn't really correlate with reading development. So you want to get to your phoneme level as soon as possible. After syllable, the next level is this onset rhyme level. This is the first where they're identifying the first phoneme. This is their first exposure. Then if they're young students in kindergarten or below, you might want to do just 2 sound words like pa or it. But pretty much with anyone in first grade or above, you're going to pretty much start here with your 3 sound words. Okay. So you have your 3 sound words with initial blends, and your 3 sound words with end blends. So people differ on this, but it's fair to say that one of the most dominant ways to teach PA in the field is to start with identification of the first sound, then go to identification of the last sound, start with splitting blends at the front end of words, then go to splitting blends at the end of words. So once you understand the sequence, you can find words to use in your phonemic awareness activities, and you know where to go next. This part here can be very challenging for students. This is a point where students, you're somewhere in the basic phonics patterns, and all of a sudden they slow down, they start to decelerate, right? And you're not quite sure why. They're having difficulty maybe learning blends. You can really leverage this blend instruction with 4 sound words to support your phonics instruction in another part of the lesson. We'll be talking about that a bit later. So let's make a plan for Bo. We're going to review his performance on the test of phonological awareness. And what I have in green here are all the ones that he got correct, just to refresh your memory. So he's got syllables, words, syllables, initial sounds and end sounds in 4 sound words, but where he really had difficulty was with these blends. So that's how we're going to make our plan. We're going to focus on 4 sound words, and we're going to use chips to teach how to blend and segment those words with initial clusters, like in clap. In the spelling part of our lesson, we might practice writing 4 sound words. That's really important, so they get that encoding practice as well. And then after they know how to segment and blend 4 sound words, we're going to move to teaching deletion. How do you break that blend and take out one of the sounds? We'll have an idea that they're getting accurate when they can do 9 out of 10 items correct orally 2 days in a row. So when we start teaching deletion in initial clusters, we are using manipulatives. We practice until they get 9 out of 10 correct. When they're doing that, and then we move to the oral instruction. Okay, I bet many of you knew this was exactly where to start with Bo. So good for you, that's super. I want to talk for a minute about mastery versus automaticity. And so first, we're always teaching for mastery. I just phrase this as accuracy first. That's something probably all of you are familiar with. So you're going to be using manipulatives to introduce those new phonemic awareness tasks. Students are going to be practicing 1 task at a time. If you're focusing on initial sounds that day, that's what the lesson is. It's initial sounds. Okay. Periodically, you can go back, you can do a mixed review, but most of the time it's going to be one task a day. You'll be providing error correction that's supportive, and the goal is to get 90% accurate for 2 lessons in a row using the manipulatives. And when they can do that, you know that they are ready then for some oral only practice. So to transition them, I might have the first few items use manipulatives. And if they're getting all those right, I'm like, hey, let's try one just by saying it. See if we can do that. And then if that one is correct, then I do the next one orally as well. If that one is not correct, we go back to the manipulatives. All right, so that was a good try. Let's see, those chips seem to help a little bit. So let's stay with those a little bit longer. And then, of course, in a couple lessons, they're doing all of it orally. And they're gaining increased speed. They're getting more confident. And then you know that they are automatic. And then you can move on to the next step in the sequence. So for any step in that color sequence, first segmenting and blending until automatic, then deletion until automatic. Then moving to the next step in the sequence. And we're always moving from work with manipulatives to more automatic work that's just oral. All right, now we're going to start the demonstration part. And we have two unified routines that we're going to introduce to you. I'm also going to talk about that first lesson that you might use to introduce initial blends. So these unified routines, I call it a unified routine because many programs give like blending activities and segmenting activities and deletion activities. I'm just like, wow, that's a lot of time to spend on all those separate activities. For any given phonemic awareness item, students should be doing segmenting and blending. Segmenting and blending. When you're doing deletion, they should be doing segmenting, blending, and deletion. That's why it's a unified routine. So you're getting all of those skills practiced within each item. Sometimes getting students started with initial blends can be kind of daunting. And so I tend to start, this would just be one lesson, with the 3 sound words. And I'd say something like, you've been segmenting 3 sound words and doing great. Today, we're going to learn about words that have 4 sounds. Let's start with a 3 sound word. I'll mark out the word late and say its sounds. Okay, so the word was late. The student echoes late, and then we go ahead and mark out this word. Late. Thank you for saying that with me. That's great. So now my question is, what if I wanted to add a to the beginning of this sound sequence? Well, let's push that up there and say the sound. Now let's touch the rest of the chips and say their sounds. O-A-T. Would you blend those sounds together? And when we do that, we get the word plate. Plate. Let's try another one starting with our 3 sounds. And this time I'm going to have you try it. So the word is pin. Echo. You say pin. Mark it out. That sounds good to me. All right. So what if you wanted to add the sound S to the beginning? That's right. It would be a green chip, and push it up there and give me the sounds. S, I, N. Good. And blend all those together. Spin. That's right. So pin with S at the end, at the front of it, is spin. So you see how you've assembled, you've started where they are, and then you've added a little new piece, right, to draw their attention to the beginning of the word. So this is the unified routine that we use for segmentation and blending. Okay, so students are in the ready position with the chips in front of them. Their eyes are on the teacher. I'm big on the ready position because if they're not ready, right, the whole thing goes by. So ready position, eyes on the teacher. I say the word normally. The student echoes the word, feeling how they say it in their mouth. Then they stretch the sounds. They push the chips as they say each sound. They touch each chip and say the sounds, and then they blend all the sounds together to say the word as it is typically spoken. So now you have that in words. So now let's go to the demonstration.
All right. So we're going to practice this routine. So grab your chips and pretend you're a student along with Jane, and watch closely because this is the unified routine. There's going to be segmenting and blending for every item. So first we're going to break them apart and then we're going to put it back together. All right, Jane, are you in the ready position?
I am in the ready position. So
Okay.
ready.
Say flute.
Flute.
Segment.
Oh, do,
Sounds.
oh, oot.
And the word is
Flute.
correct. Bring those back down. Say sled.
Sled.
Segment.
Oh, d.
Sounds.
Oh, ed. Sled.
Correct. Bring those back down. Say flip.
Flip.
Segment.
Oh,
Sounds.
oh, flip.
Correct. Say spot.
Spot.
Segment.
Uh,
So let's say the word spot again, and I want you to feel that second sound as you say it.
spot. Spot. Spot.
There you go, correct. Bring those back.
Right. So if you have questions about that, we'll be happy to talk about that more in the discussion. Right. So that's the unified routine where they're doing segmenting and blending for each item. Okay, so now let's take a look at the unified routine for PA deletion. So students are in the ready position, same thing. You've got the segmentation part of the routine that you're familiar with, right? And then you go to the deletion part of the routine, and then you end with the blending.
All right, so we are going to be practicing again. So if you can pull those chips back out. And then we will walk through this blending, segmenting, and deleting routine. All right, are we back in the ready position?
Yes.
Okay, say blog.
Blog.
Segment.
Blog. Blog.
Good. What if you take away the b? Touch the sound that will move out. Correct? And tell me those sounds that are left.
Log. Log.
Correct. Bring those chips back. Say stun.
Stun.
Segment those sounds. Good. Let's say the sounds again and touch those chips at the same time you're saying the sounds.
Stun.
And what if you take away the s? Touch the sound that will move out. Correct?
Ton.
Ton. You said ton. Correct. All right, bring those back. So in the next two examples, we're going to show what it will look like when the student is more automatic. So say twin.
Twin. In twin.
Say it again without the t sound.
Sometimes students are just impulsive, you know? Okay.
So chips back up there.
Twin without the which sound? Win.
Correct. Bring those back. Say snap.
Snap. Snap. Snap. Snap. And okay.
Say it again without the s sound.
Nap.
Correct.
So see how I didn't have to say each of the sounds here. I could just like say what was left. That's the little indicator that they're probably ready to start with some oral only activities, assuming that the accuracy is there. Thank you, Dr. Martin. Okay, and there's just a look at that unified routine again. Great. So now we come into the final part of the session, which is talking about how to connect phonemic awareness. When you're teaching that with struggling readers, how do you connect that with phonics instruction? And there are three bridges that I tend to use in my practice. So one is that I use spelling. So whatever we're doing in PA, I also have a time in the lesson when students are writing. Okay, and so they're using the manipulatives, those little chips, to segment the sounds. So I dictate the word pin. They say out loud pin. Then everybody has some little blank chips. They mark it out. And then they write the letters next to it on their paper. Okay, so you're using the same manipulatives, connecting the sounds to letters that they're writing in a different part of the lesson. So that makes for a nice echo. Another way is to sprinkle some letters into your PA instruction. And Dr. Martin's going to talk about that in a moment. And then the last way is to have PA instruction preview your phonics instruction. That's also possible.
Okay. So a sprinkle of a few letters in your PA instruction supports your students' phonological processing, and it also makes that alphabetic principle transparent, that sound symbol connection. And that's really what why we're doing all of this. So let's walk through an example. So if the word was mat, the student would echo mat, and then we would go through and segment at. Then we're going to touch those chips and say the sound again, at. And then now this, after this step 3, this is the new part. So this is where you as the interventionist or teacher would say, if you were spelling mat, where would the letter T go? Now write that on the chip. And it's really convenient if you have laminated chips or just regular plastic chips. A dry erase marker easily writes on it and then easily wipes off. And then the student would write that T on the chip and then blend those sounds together again. At, mat. So we'll walk through that again with a 4-sound word. So here again, as the interventionist, I'm going to say the word, say smug. The student's going to repeat smug. Segment. Good. Sound while touching. smug. Now, what would the word be without the s sound? Which chip's going to move out? The student's going to touch the chip. Teacher's going to make sure it's correct, move it out. And then now again, here's the new part. Where would the letter G go in this word? Student would take their pen, go ahead and write that letter G on there, and then they were going to blend the sounds and say the new word, mug.
Before we get into the previewing the phonics piece, so I just wanted to highlight the idea that you're using one letter on some of your items to make that connection between the sounds and the letters while keeping students' attention primarily on the sounds and segmenting the sounds, because that's the root that they need to strengthen. And you should find that helpful. Right, so phonemic awareness can preview phonics. So if you're progressing with your PA instruction along that sequence, and first you're building mastery, and when they have 9 out of 10 correct for 2 days, then you move from manipulatives to doing the tasks orally. And then when they can do that with all the items orally for 2 days, 9 out of 10 correct, then you move on to the next step in the phonemic awareness instruction. It will be going along at a different pace than your phonics, right? Think about how long you spend with CVC words in your phonics instruction. Quite long. There's a lot to teach there. There's a lot to work through. So PA may actually be moving ahead, and that's totally fine because they're independent pieces that work together, but they don't need to be in sync. So students can be working in PA to segment spoken words with 4 sounds while still mastering the reading and spelling of 3 sound words. That's not a problem, right? Because we're operating orally. It's a different skill. They don't need to know the phonics skills in order to do the PA task. So they can be working ahead with 4 sounds. So the ability to segment the 4 sound words can facilitate reading and spelling words with blends. So I'll just throw this out there as a thought. If you disagree, that's completely fine, but it's just a thought. You know, when you're teaching blends, you're not teaching any new sounds. They already know each of those individual sounds. They can read them in 3 sound words. What you're teaching is the principle of the consonant cluster and how that works, right? The concept of that. And so if you get ahead in your PA and they can split words with initial blends, you can start practicing initial blends in your phonics lesson. You don't have to teach blend by blend. They already know those sounds. Teaching blend by blend takes a lot of time. So with some kids that's necessary, but with many kids it's not. Once they understand this concept and can segment the 4 sound words, blend them together, and do the deletion, they're ready for words with initial consonant clusters on the reading list. So you might find that to be a time saver. So now let's go back to the knowledge check that you were working on at the beginning of our session together today. And let's just go ahead and fill these in. Okay. And I'm going to give you an opportunity to kind of think for yourself what it is for the fill in the blank. This will be a good little review. And then I'll supply the answer. Okay. So PA activities build what and support reading comprehension. So what is the process that you're developing when you're doing PA activities? What is the cognitive process that's contributing to reading? And that, of course, is if you put phonological in there, you were right. It's the phonological. PA activities build phonological processes in the brain and support reading comprehension. Let's go to the second one. Most struggling readers cannot learn new PA skills using oral-only activities. Okay, teach new tasks with, so if you're not going to do oral only, what would you be using when you're teaching new PA tasks? You might be using, and if you're thinking manipulatives, that's right. You would be using manipulatives for new phonemic awareness tasks. Number 3, if phonemic awareness instruction is ahead of phonics, as it sometimes is, it can support what kind of instruction? You might be thinking instruction in blends or initial consonant clusters or just phonics instruction. All of those are right answers. If phonemic awareness instruction gets ahead of phonics, it can support phonics instruction, kind of pave the way. Number 4, a rough sequence of phonemic awareness instruction is, this was the hard one, this was the 4 blanks. Okay. You're going to do 3 sound words. First, you're going to be deleting what sounds and then end sounds. First, many people do initial sounds, right? If you were thinking initial, that's correct. Then you're going to move to 4 sound words where they're going to be splitting, again, initial blends and then end blends. How are you doing? Everybody doing well? A little recap. Sometimes it's tough when your brain is tired from participating in the session for a while. You're doing great though. Okay, number 5, sprinkling in some letters as you teach PA can increase awareness of what principle? If you bring a letter in some of your items as you're teaching PA, you're building the connection between the sounds and the letters, right? So that's the alphabetic principle. If you were thinking alphabetic principle, that's correct. Great. I want to thank everybody for your attention today in the session. I really look forward to the questions. You can scan this and get access to the free teacher guide that has these routines in it, as well as a lot of other information about teaching phonemic awareness. And I just wanted to leave you with this figure, the idea that teaching PA helps students become more receptive to learning phonics. And PA is part of your overall literacy instruction.